So, Scott, my topic for today, this month, is I love Dr. Enid Gray's book, Neglect the Silent Abuser.
Yeah.
Um, and it was funny because I was pulling this out, and you and I are both noted in the foreword, which was incredibly kind of Dr. Enid. But it's the content. I realized I have been referring to this book a lot again, and so I was like, I'm gonna pull it out and review it, and so I'm pulling this content from Neglect the Silent Abuser by Dr. Enid Gray. She has done a podcast with Dr. Rob on our website, sex, or on the podcast series Sex, Love, and Addiction as well. So nothing I am going to say is unique. This is all, I'm pulling it from the information that Dr. Enid has shared. But the book is Neglect the Silent Abuser: How to Recognize and Heal from Childhood Neglect. And one of the things that I thought was so interesting, as I was doing this was like it was, so many of us don't even have a concept that there was any neglect. In fact, she said often, we have a recollection of our childhood as idyllic, like, oh, we had a great childhood, everything was great in our families. Or there's gaps. She commented that there's lots of people that have gaps in their time periods, before ages 12 or 13. So I'm going to quote this. I'm going to read this one. Neglect is the cornerstone of all other abuse. It is the foundational wounding that precludes other, more overt types of abuse. What child who experiences overt abuse was valued, loved, seen, accepted, and considered? And she talks about, so neglect is we're going to talk about this as more the covert version. And she said, this can range from mild to severe. And many of us still perceive that our, parents were wonderful people. And I do think many of them were wonderful people, but there's still gaps in, what was, able to be provided. She notes that in clinical terms, neglect is called an attachment disorder. And we talk often about attachment wounds. Troy Love, lots of other of our hosts talk about attachment wounds and where that leads. But she said, in clinical terms, it's an attachment disorder. Neglect is sometimes used interchangeably with abandonment, but that brings up kind of the physical leaving, where neglect is more about people who were emotionally or physically present, but emotionally not present. So, present but not present at the same time. And she talks about neglect is lonely, in that. And I think this is where often, people with addiction go to, I'm alone, I'm all alone, no one can meet my needs emotionally. So therefore, I'm going to find ways to uh, self-soothe, to dissociate, etc. So, and she talked about the various forms of abuse that are more overt. So like physical abuse, I think we all have an understanding of that, and that hitting is never deserved. It's never about the child did something to deserve that. Verbal abuse, and that can include statements such as the child's lack of intellectual ability, physical appearance, lack of ability to make a parent proud, or comparing to others. Sometimes it's siblings. You're not as, pretty as your sister, or you're not as smart as your brother. I mean, some of those type of things, or the neighbor. Emotional abuse, when a child is forbidden to have or express feelings, or to have an opinion. The child cannot trust that someone else is going to hear them. It can even be controlling a child with fright to behave. Putting a child in a surrogate spouse, the mother enmeshment, we talk often about that. John Taylor has done, some webinars on our platform about that. Or caregiving for the caregiver's emotional needs, so, and sometimes it's like, mommy's boy or daddy's girl, those type of things. And they can have a connotation of like, oh, I'm just really close to my parent, but it really needs to be looked at, for those underlying layers as well. Sexual abuse, overt, that the child wouldn't know that, but there are so many, like voyeurism, a lack of privacy, exhibitionism, leering, even comments, particularly as, a child enters puberty, there can be body comments, inappropriate jokes or innuendos. And then spiritual or religious abuse, and that's a larger topic. But falsely empowering the child, I thought that one was really interesting. It's kind of like sometimes we talk about the term king baby, where the son is everything, and everything he does is perfect and wonderful and all of that type of thing. Or the religious abuse, where there's institutions, leaders, and they're doing things under the guise of religion. So those are kind of the overt, and abuse aspects. But her comment was that neglect is covert. It is not seen like overt abuse. So you can't see it or like a physical abuse. So it's easy to deny that it even happens. And I think that that's why there's that disconnect of like, I had a great childhood, everything was good, but there's those undercurrents. So she commented on high risk families. And I think many of us will go, yes, there we are. So one or both parents suffer from some sort of mental illness, and no one talks to the children about it. I think this is key, and no one talks to the children about it. One or both parents are addicted to drugs or alcohol, and no one talks to the children about it. One or both parents are workaholics, signifying to the children that they are secondary to the parent's career. Economic conditions dictate that the parents work more than one job, leaving little time or energy for the children. One or more siblings is sick, troubled, needy, or handicapped and require attention that the other children do not get. The need to, this is the bigger problem. And this one I thought of with many people too. A sibling is talented and the focus is on their achievements. And how often do we hear about that, where one child has some gift or talent, and so the whole family energy is devoted to that. Infidelity or sex addiction causing the other parent to be devastated and unable to focus on the energy on the children. And I hear this often with betrayed partners who are reaching out, and they're like, I don't have the ability to be the parent that I want to be. So a single parent household with a parent focused on finding a mate rather than caring for the children. Death of a parent, leaving remaining parent grief-stricken and unable to have the energy to parent. Birth of an unexpected or unwanted child. And so those are things that she identifies as high risk. The other side of neglect is too much control. And we talked briefly about mother enmeshed men. Too much control does not permit the child to think for themselves. Neglect of the soul, they are overwhelmed. Their thoughts and feelings are wrong, and therefore they have to defer to the caretakers or the enmeshed parents' views. And they're dependent on the caretaker, and we talk sometimes about failure to launch, people, addicts who are in their, 20s or 30s, but they're still, emotionally, financially tied to a parent because all of the control was given to the parent or taken by the parent. And here's what I think is important. She writes, you have to decide what you want to, what you want to do. And if you're willing to do something about this, Scott and I are talking from a recovery standpoint. At some point, we have to make a decision that we're willing to engage in behaviors that are different, that we're willing to step through the fear of change, and trust that there will be something different on the other side. And I can understand that fear is often a challenge. So it is challenging to accept that there might be something amiss when we were children, to look back at your childhood and go, oh, wait, it wasn't as perfect as I thought it was. That my parents aren't as as perfect as they wanted us to look at, like with a facade. That we've shut down our feelings. We can stay busy. We can get focus on all kinds of external things to not have to look at that. But feeling the pain, we can allow our emotions to connect and to name them. So the change takes time, commitment, and courage. And I think that's where a lot of people get hung up. It's like, there's no quick fix. We have to be willing to commit to the process. And there could be external factors, like the system doesn't want us to change. An enmeshed parent does not want you to change. It is worth it, as if we do not transform the pain, we will transmit it. Meaning, if we, and I think this is where a lot of it comes from with, other generations too, is like, these maladaptive coping mechanisms, everybody's doing the best that they can. But if we choose to do the work, we can improve, we can feel better, and we can break the chain that could be the legacy of pain. So like that was truly like the fastest version. This is such a good book, and there are chapters of like living in balance and stay in the now. I mean, like, she's very practical in her work. So if any of that resonated, and you kind of go, oh wait, that feels uncomfortable, and because that, I can relate to it, you please pick up the book. The book is listed on our website. And the podcast is as well. So there are resources for that. But anyway, so that was kind of my topic on neglect. Any thoughts? I know you valued Dr. Enid's work too.
Yeah, very, very much so. When you were reading off the family traits, neglect. The real big point is neglect is covert, but it is a form of abuse. It is a form of trauma.
Yes, yes.
And most of, I had no idea that I had a bad childhood, even though there was some overt abuse. It took therapy, but most of the abuse in my household and the trauma in my household was covert. It was hidden. It was, the child's needs just simply not being met beyond, plenty of clothes and food and games
Yes,
to
yes.
play.
From the outside, it looks like, oh, you're got your
Right.
house, like all of these
Yeah.
things. Yeah.
Yeah. But there was no emotional support. Emotional support in our house went from everybody to my mother, which is what we call, emotional incest or covert incest or mother enmeshed men. Just lots of other stuff. And I know your story. So, you probably check different boxes on the family dysfunction, but, everyone does, but the results are the same. We're hurting, and we often feel less than and unworthy of love and affection and of getting our needs met. So, which is why we turn to an addiction. I mean, that's the underlying, instead of me calling, a family member or a friend when I'm having a bad day, I learned early on that's not going to work because there was a lot of emotional neglect in my house. I turn to a substance or a behavior to self-soothe. That's the crux of addiction. And this is a book. It's a brilliant book. It's the best thing I've ever read on neglect by far, particularly from an addiction context. So very good topic, Tami. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, well, yeah, and I'm so grateful to Dr. Enid. But like I said, I really like that was the quickest Reader's Digest version, and there's so many, and like get professional help. And she talks about the trauma and getting like EMDR, like there are specific trauma things. But I think my hope was that people will go, oh wait, there really was something, and
Right.
there really is help. You don't have to stay stuck in it. And it does take courage and commitment and time, but I always say, because people go, oh, 3 years. I'm like, yeah, but in 3 years you're going to be 3 years older, and but why would
Right.
we not want to be on a different path so that we are on a healing path? And I'm like, I have healed so much of these wounds, and I know you have done your work too. So it doesn't make it all better, but we don't have to get all caught up in it.
Right.
But understanding, and yes, I check off different boxes in that, but when I first read this, I mean, I was like, I got struck between the eyes. I could not believe, like, I mean, that was my life. And I would never have known that, because
Right.
I was like, we look good, like, intact family, whatever, it just, but yeah, stuff happened.
And it's actually an easy read. It's a painful
Oh, yeah,
read,
yeah,
but an
yeah,
easy read.
yeah.
One of the questions that came in was, is this the chemsex webinar? So apologize to anybody who's here for the chemsex webinar. Last week. We had to flip with David. Um,
Yes,
so anyway, you can find a video of that on our YouTube channel. So you can check.
yes. Yes,
So
I will put the link in the chat,
uh,
for that
yeah,
and all the other ones. Oh, did you already?
I'll take care of it.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Because I'm going to give you this first question first. So this is
Okay.
from a betrayed partner. Says I'm
Yes.
struggling with understanding my sex addict's why. Why did he do all of this? Will I ever understand? I'm not getting what I feel is deep enough remorse and empathy. If he's able to build on that, will the why make more sense? We're 6 months post full therapeutic disclosure, and I almost feel like I need another disclosure on his why or other details that I feel are missing. Great question. I'm going to
I
post some
answer this
resources.
all the time. Yeah. So
Yeah, I'm going to
yeah,
post
yeah,
some resources in the
yeah.
chat feature while Tami
Yes.
answers.
I think I already answered one this morning with the why. So first of all, I tell betrayed partners, you would never do this stuff, so your brain will never think like this. So even if you understand it's from the why is because these are maladaptive coping mechanism, it wasn't personal, it wasn't about you, nothing you did or didn't do caused this, but your brain will never think like an addict brain. We all get it, we go, yeah, we totally understand, not that it's justified, I'm not saying that at all, but the why is a question. I've been in recovery for decades, and I have more layers of why. Like, this book was a huge awakening, and that was, I don't know what, 5 years ago, whatever. I don't remember when it came out, but like, so if you're looking for the why so that you understand, I apologize, but I don't know anybody that ever gets that. I think it's more important to know, what is he doing to build trust now? What is he doing to be on a recovery path? How do the two of you move forward? But it feels like safety seeking, because if I just know the why, then I'll be able to get ahead of that and keep him from being able to do that. Again, not your job. It's your job is to take care of you. You are 6 months post formal therapeutic discovery or disclosure. I don't know how long since you had discovery, but remember, his path, it takes, 2 to 5 years to really be in solid recovery. If you are seeing that he is making progress, great. And then there's the work for you to do, like, what are you doing that is helping you with your betrayal trauma? We have lots of resources, like the Betrayed Partner online work group starts again June 23rd. The Empowered Women's Retreat is August 15th. That is amazing and healing. I'll put the link, for that in the chat in a minute. But like, so rather than focusing on the why for him, I would love for you to focus on, what are your healthy boundaries? What do you need to do to take care of you? Debbie McCrae often talks about, well, she always talks about, tools for partners. And she's talked about the externally focused partner. It's a roadblock to your healing, because you're always, focused on him and why, and, what do you need to do to help him? No, you focusing on you, healthy boundaries, that's how you can heal. And hopefully he's doing the work that he needs to do. You guys can have a better relationship built on honesty, yeah, I mean, if you do another disclosure and you're just looking for the whys, I don't know that he, maybe he can give you a little bit more, but it's not the relevant question. Like, to me, and Dr. Rob says this too, like, we've talked about this a lot. It really is, what is he doing to move forward? How do you, bridge the gap, in your relationship? And what do you need to do to take care of you so that you are on a healing path for you, regardless of what he's doing or not doing? And one more thing, and then I'll turn it over to Scott. But I really find, if you're focused on I mean, you're focused on the past if you're looking for all of those whys, you know, and not that, I mean, you deserve details. You've had a formal therapeutic disclosure that sets the foundation for moving forward. And that's where I'm going with this is, you know, if you're still hanging back here looking for the why, rather than, okay, we've done our formal therapeutic disclosure. I'm working on moving forward. It doesn't make this all go away, but it helps you move forward through, you know, the trauma and the pain and into a healthy relationship. So thoughts?
Yeah. Um, uh, um, I get this question from addicts all the time. Why?
Yeah.
Who can I blame? And when are they going to make things right?
Yes, that's probably
Um,
it.
but you know, the more direct answer is addiction arises from unresolved early life neglect and trauma. Period. Research proves it over and over and over. Um, People with unresolved early life childhood trauma and neglect are much more likely to become addicts than people who don't have it. Whether we've recognized it or not as addicts, it will have to ultimately be dealt with. But first things first, let's get sober. And first things first for betrayed partners, let's get some proper support so we don't obsess on the why. And the one thing, I don't know if Tami said this or not, I was typing a few things, but um, this is not your fault. You are not the why. That he's not an addict because of you. Just don't go there. Not your fault. Um, you know, addicts are people who had unresolved early life trauma and or neglect, usually both, that taught them I'm not worthy, I'm not good enough, I don't matter, my feelings don't matter, and no one will ever help me when I'm struggling. That's what we learn. We develop a shame-based sense of self, and we stop trying to get help in healthy ways from other people. Again, we turn to a substance or behavior to self-soothe, and that pattern starts early, and we learn to keep lies and secrets because we're shame based. You know, we've been taught we're unworthy, so we don't show our real selves, and we carry this unfortunately into our adult lives. um, you know, and we don't just cover up our addiction, we cover up our feelings, we cover up, you know, it's really terrible for betrayed partners to realize they married somebody that they married the facade that their partner, that the addict was showing them. So I totally understand why you want more info. What I hear you asking is, I want to know who my partner really is under all of this. I want to really know and love the actual person, and I think that's a beautiful thing. Um, that will likely come in time, but he has some deeper work to do. We have 3 work groups coming up that are really good for addicts to get a handle on their underlying stuff. So I share those with him, encourage him to sign up for one, please. So yeah.
I'm
Anyway.
going to tag 2 more things and then we'll go to the next question. But, you know, like you say, what deep enough remorse? What is that? You know, and even empathy. I tell partners all the time, like empathy is like this nebulous term. I don't know what it is. You know, I don't have any skills for that when I first get into, you know, like Scott just said, we're all numbed out. We're all packed down. We're, you know, detached. So if you know, like if you're looking for empathy, empathy to me would be if you do this, you know, and be really clear what you're looking like or looking for, you know, and deep enough remorse, like if he's working on his, you know, if he's doing his 4th and 5th step and the 12 steps and he's doing that, that's what he will be finding out. But, you know, if I, remorse is edgy because it's one of those where if it falls into shame, guess what one of the most likely things for relapse is shame. So we take accountability for our actions, but you know, one of the things in 12 step is, you know, we are not a sad lot or a glum lot, you know, like we cannot, you know, walk around in the, oh my gosh, I've done such horrible things and I'm such a horrible person. Like that doesn't help us. We have got to take responsibility for what we've done, our behaviors, and understand that we can learn to live differently. but it takes time. I suspect even with 6 months past formal therapeutic disclosure, you're still in the early phases. He's probably done this. These behaviors usually start like, this is about childhood stuff. This is usually before age 10. So, a 30-year-old, you're probably going, I've been numbing out on some level for 20 years, and every year, every decade you're older, guess what? There's another decade of those patterns being in place. So please know that there's hope. Please know that you're early in this process, and I know you want answers. But some of those, I really think you want safety. You want to know, like Scott said, who is this person that I'm in a relationship with? That makes sense, and there's support for getting help around that. So the next one, Scott, I'm going to read and you get to start off. I have significant chemsex addiction currently in a long facility in Canada. Every 2 weeks, I have a mental relapse where I fantasize and lose control. No drug use, but thinking of drugs and masturbating. I've attempted abstaining, and when between 3 and 4 months, then would act out sexually, and then using within a week. Thoughts or recommendations? I've tried mindful masturbation, but slippery slope lately.
Yeah. I think this is one of the people who was hoping for David today. Chemsex addiction is where we combine substance use and abuse with sexual behavior. I'm glad you're in a facility. We treat chemsex down here more directly than anybody, I think. But
for sure,
every 2 weeks you got a mental relapse. Here's the deal: mindful masturbation. No, just no. Not for you. Sorry, none. Thank you. And guys are like, well, if I don't have, then I'm not having any sex at all. Guess what? Maybe you need to not have any sex at all until you get safely sober. And guys are always worried about, what's going to happen? I'm going to get colon cancer. I'm going to, no, just no, nothing happens. If you can go 6 months, a year, 10 years without an orgasm and nothing goes wrong physically.
You just heard a whole bunch of going, oh my God.
Yeah. I won't use the language that I use when I'm talking to addicts and it's only a bunch of men in the room, but it usually makes them laugh. But it's not, you get some clarity. That's all that will happen. Forget about mindful masturbation. It's never going to happen for you. Sorry, dude. Yeah. Stay in recovery, drop the masturbation, and find people you can speak with really openly and honestly about this when you are triggered. That is the only way to get through this. You get a year of sobriety, we'll have another conversation, but you're not there yet.
So you did, and you've done it a couple times, but the cycle of addiction webinar. So we have those videos on our website. And this is what I hear with you is, every 3 to 4 months, and right. So, and I always say it's like the pressure cooker. So I can be abstinent for a while, but I'm also, I'm going to make some assumptions that you are in a long-term facility and it's for substances. I don't know any facilities in Canada that really work with, sex addiction. And so, like Scott said, that's what we do is we're working holistically, across, all forms of addiction. Sometimes it's eating disorders or gaming, for the guys that come to us. But it's about addressing those underlying issues. We talked about neglect is just one, like that's just one of the things, but there's underlying reasons why you're zipping into this fantasy. You're like that's Scott talks about the 3-second rule, and like that's about looking. But if you're letting your mind go into these fantasy places, it's dangerous. Like that is territory we are not good at. And so, I would really work on what is your 3-circle plan so that when you know that you're in that middle circle and it's a slippery slope, that you're choosing something in your outer circle. If you have not already participated in Scott's work group for Sex Addiction 101, there's another group that's starting Saturday, July 6th, right?
6th or 7th, whatever the Saturday.
Yeah, whatever. It's on all of the links that we've shared. But those are 90 minutes live facilitated. He does a lecture, but there's homework, and you will have a 3-circle plan. You will have some foundational components that will help you because if you're just working on not doing, that's not the goal. Recovery is, we have joy, we have serenity, we have connections. It's not just about, hanging on with our fingernails, to not acting out. Okay, next one, addict here. Is relapse really a part of recovery process? I'm fresh off of a slip after months of sobriety. I feel I've been doing good work, but it's hard to feel like it's enough in light of this, not to mention the painful impact on my wife. This time does feel different and was less of an emotional setback. Do we have to accept relapse? What's the best way to handle it?
Slips and relapse are not part of recovery. They're slips and relapse. That said, they should not look. The difference between a slip is, oop, I acted out again, I come clean about it, I get right back on the horse. Relapse is a slip that I don't tell anyone about and then I keep doing. That's relapse. That's our terminology. Either way, these are learning experiences. If you email me, scott@seekingintegrity.com, SCOTT@seekingintegrity.com, I will send you what we call a relapse autopsy. We have an exercise that we use. I'll send it to you. It walks you backward and you can figure out where this started, what happened, so you can learn from it. Slips are not necessary. Relapses are not necessary. We don't want them. They're incredibly painful for us. They're incredibly painful for betrayed partners. They're incredibly painful. But if you come clean about it, you get back on the recovery horse and you figure out what caused it, you can learn from it so it won't happen again. That's the best we can do with the slip and relapse, is learn from it so it doesn't happen again. So please email me, scott@seekingintegrity.com, say I'm the guy who slipped, send me the relapse autopsy. I will, boom, you'll have it. Tami?
Yeah, and I'm with you. Like it depends. I don't think it's an automatic. I know lots of people go, "Oh, relapse is just part of recovery." It hasn't been part of my journey, and so like when I'm in a 12-step meeting and it's relapse, it's one of my least favorite topics because I don't abide by it. Has to happen, but I love when we learn. Like life is, let's learn from, okay, that didn't work as well, so what do I need to do things differently? So yes, the autopsy on it, but I suspect you weren't really paying attention in that middle circle, because there's usually, if you're paying attention, you're going, oh yeah, I'm in that middle circle, what do I need to do to get in that outer circle again, rather than sliding into the inner circle and slipping. So, but I also hear that you slipped, and so you've told your wife. I know it's painful, but that's different than, her having to find out, and, like, oh, I found out a month later that you did this, and now, like, so even with that, it's like, okay, this is different. That's not how the pattern was before. So, yeah, please, like Scott said, get back on the recovery horse, and, we're here. So, okay. The SRH events calendar shows Kristen Snowden on Monday, but the event webinar, oh yeah, no, so Scott will look at that. Yeah, I don't know why it would ever be on Monday. There was, when we flip things, which we did, sometimes the system does weird things. So we apologize for any error, but yeah, no, Kristen Snowden is never on Monday. She's on Wednesdays and on part of this series. So, okay. 1 second, my SA husband wants help. Then I send even this book, and he tells me not to manage him. It's such a blame manage cycle for both of us. Do you think a betrayed partner and SA can really heal in the same house? What are your thoughts on therapeutic separation? How do you know when it's needed?
Yes, betrayed partners and sex addicts can heal in the same house. Absolutely. But sometimes a therapeutic separation can be helpful. A therapeutic separation is, we're going to live apart. We're going to have boundaries. It's got a time frame. You set it up with a therapist first. You agree how we're going to communicate, what I'm going to accomplish, what you're going to accomplish, when we're going to come back together. How do you know when it's needed? You discuss it with your therapist and your partner. And that said, if you just simply hand him a book and he goes into a plane, he is still deeply in denial. addicts are like, God, if you weren't such a nag, I wouldn't have to do this. That's an addict thing. Please
Which
send
is
him,
not true. Yeah.
you know,
So,
please send him to my work group. I will break him of that. Um,
yeah.
you know, yeah. Um, can you do it in the same house? Absolutely. If you find that you and your partner are struggling because you're in the same house, consider a therapeutic separation, but treat it like a temporary separation. So I can do my work, he can do his work, and then we can come back together when we're in a better headspace. Uh, you know, therapeutic separation is not filing for divorce. It is sitting down with a therapist, laying out the boundaries and the parameters and the goals so that you can come back together and work as a couple instead of as doing this. So, Tami, if you want to add.
Well, yeah, and I'm with you because I hear people that were, in a therapeutic separation. I'm like, what are the
Right.
boxes that are being checked? What is the plan? And there aren't any. So that's just called a separation, and there's no real plan. And but I find that if I'm curious, like that, that's helpful. So sometimes, husband, you asked, you asked for some help, and I find some resources. So I'm curious that when I give you these, you feel like there's control with that. So what I hear you saying is you don't really want any assistance, you don't want any resources, and that you are going to find those on your own. Is that correct? And that's just a communication thing of like, okay, tell me what it is, and because I will take note of that. But trust me, you have enough to do the healing work for you. Like all of this that's crazy making. I'm not saying you're crazy, that's crazy making. And so like healthy boundaries for you, like, okay, I'm going to take care of me. I've got resources for me, and gosh, I'm feeling better. Great. Yeah, I'm with Scott though. This is, I want help. Dr. Rob does this all the time. Come here, go away. Come here, go away. And that's what it feels like. Come here, help me. No, I don't want help, and it also sounds like a 4-year-old. So, okay, next question, Scott. My husband started off motivated for recovery, but relapsed immediately after between us. He has since said he's burned out, and my expectation of 90 and 90 is too much. He's
Heaven
back in
forbid.
active addiction. He seems to only want recovery if it's being validated. And the moment he's not getting his validation, he refuses to continue recovery steps. How do I show up compassion to this being hard work and motivate him without him using his recovery as a manipulation tool for validation?
Wow. Here's what I'm going to say to the betrayed partners out there. Um, you can't get well for him. As much as you would like to fix him and get him well so that your relationship and you can heal, his recovery is up to him. And what we're seeing here is a guy who seems to have no real interest in recovery. Started off motivated. We all do because we're in crisis. But, expecting 90 meetings, 90 12-step meetings in 90 days, they're an hour each. Oh, I don't have time for that. And look, I use this excuse. I don't have time for that. I couldn't possibly. Well, I was acting out like 6 hours a day. I had plenty of time for 12-step meetings. Anytime there was conflict, I only had the one coping. I'm speaking for me as an addict, and I'm talking about myself in active addiction here. I only had one coping mechanism, and it was to get drunk or high or act out sexually or all three at the same time. I mean, that's how I handle any conflict, any stress, any anxiety, any emotion I didn't want to feel. And sometimes even joy and happiness were too much for me and I had to numb out. Um, you know, uh, that was my coping, and I didn't want to let go. I did not want to let go of my coping mechanism. And anything that challenged, you know, that was my best friend. My addiction had been longer with me longer than any person in my life. And it was the friend that was always there for me when I was down. I didn't want to say goodbye to that. friend, even though that friend was ruining my life by that point. So, being asked to attend 90 meetings in 90 days, I didn't want to go to any meetings, let alone 90 and 90. Oh, that's a lot of time. And, I might have to drive 5 minutes and park my car. I mean, I had a whole bunch of excuses. Um, and hey, guess what? I stayed in active addiction, which is what your husband is doing. Now, if somebody was patting me on the back, okay, well, maybe I'd get a little more motivated for like 2 seconds. But I mean, an addict's motivation has to come from within. My sobriety date is the day that I decided to go to a 12-step meeting for me because I was destroying my soul. I couldn't live that way anymore. I just had that moment of clarity and said, nope. And I went back to 12-step, and I had been in and out for a while, and I've been sober ever since because I was doing it because I was destroying myself, and I couldn't live that way anymore. Um, how do you show compassion to him? I don't know. It's your job to show compassion for him. Um, I if I was married to somebody, if I was going through what you're going through, I'd have a really tough time being compassionate and trying to motivate somebody who doesn't want to be motivated. Um, you said he's using his recovery as a manipulation tool for validation. I mean, I wouldn't even call it his recovery. I'd call it his box ticking. Like, oh, I'll go to a meeting, but then you have to like make me a nice dinner, or you have to have sex with me, or whatever it is. That's not recovery. Um, Recovery is when you are genuinely working to change your life for the better. Um, and boy, I don't know how a betrayed partner can effectively motivate somebody. I mean, and we've seen all the tricks and the tactics. Like, if you don't do this, you're going to have to move out, or if you don't do this, I'm filing for divorce. If you don't do it, addicts will change when they decide to change. Your job as a betrayed partner, and I'm sure Tami will address this, is to take care of yourself. And that involves getting support for what you're going through, getting some validation for the feelings you're having, and setting some boundaries that make sense for you. What can you live with? What can you not live with? If you're going to stay in this relationship, what do you need to see from him? And you can give him those boundaries. Um, but understand, boundaries are about you protecting you. They're not about him changing. You can say, I need to see this, this, and this from you if you're going to stay in the house, and I'm going to stay in this relationship. If I don't see that, I am going to ask you to move out, or I am going to take the kids and move out. But, healthy boundaries are about our own behavior, not about controlling someone else's behavior. The other thing I like to say about healthy boundaries is they're not about pushing people away or keeping them out. They're about letting them in safely. And, you obviously love your husband. You wouldn't be married to him if you didn't. But how can you have a safe relationship with him? And right now, this does not sound emotionally safe to me at all. It sounds kind of emotionally miserable. Um, and your needs are not getting met. I mean, this is basically your needs are being neglected in favor of him and his addictive choices. So I strongly encourage you, and Tami will, again, she's much better at addressing this than I am. Get support for yourself, set some healthy boundaries, and, we'll cross our fingers that he'll get the help he needs. He sounds like a really good candidate for inpatient treatment. And that might be one of the boundaries. You go to inpatient where they can actually break through all this denial and rationalization and blame and all this craziness. Or you're going to have to move out. I mean, I will ask you to move out, or whatever. I mean, that might be one of the boundaries that you set, but it's still up to him to choose to come to inpatient or not. Hopefully he will. Tami, thoughts?
I ditto, what you're saying. Yeah. And he's burned out with my expectation of 90 and 90. And so, no, actually, let me back up. He relapsed immediately after a conflict between us. He was never in recovery. You cannot relapse if you're not in recovery. He was always in active addiction, or he had a period of abstinence. Abstinence is just not doing the problematic behaviors, but there's no change, and what I hear is this person has had zero change. And I hear you trying to, understandably, again, like, please, this is not, you did it wrong, or judgment, but you're focusing on, like, I'm trying to get him to be the guy that he can be, and he's not showing up to do that, and blaming you. When you talk about the conflict between us, I would invite you to, like, that's dysregulating for you. So yeah, healthy boundary for you might be, if he's trying to engage you like that, you go, yeah, I'm going to go do my mindfulness. I'm going to go take care of me. I'm going to, I'm not going to play that game. Because that often is like, look at, you have all these expectations on me, again, unfair, and so therefore I deserve to go act out. This is not about being validated from, if he's right now looking for external things to, to numb him out and escape, and now he's also looking for you to validate. So it's always external. So like Scott said, when he finally did this because it was the right thing to do for him, then guess what, he actually changed. So the compassion, like, this is the one area where you can have compassion. If you think of him as this neglected little kid that was
Right.
under age 10, I always say, if you've got kids and you look at, the 8-year-old and go, this person is living in an adult body, but that's what they are, you could have compassion from that standpoint. But everything else is like, yeah, no, it's healthy boundaries for you. And they're not punishment, they're not control. This is for my safety. You are not a safe person to be involved with. So I'm gonna be over here, and here's the things that I would be looking for that would help me, feel like that there's some safety. Like
Yeah.
Scott said, 90 meetings in 90 days. I went to way more than 90 meetings in 90 days because I had all kinds of time that I was no longer acting out. I had, like, I still had free time. I did other, service
Yeah.
projects and things like that. Like, yeah, I needed to fill my time with good things. I wasn't in a relationship, thank
Yeah.
goodness. But anyway, so it's one of those things where, I hear a lot of excuses, but even, and we both love 12 step. We did a webinar on 12 step. We love 12 step, but 90 meetings in 90 days, this is a guy that, would probably really benefit from, from residential treatment. There's on our Seeking Integrity homepage, there's a self-assessment, and there's 25 questions. And guess what? We just found out recently that lots of people stop about halfway through. I suspect they're getting too
I'm going
many
to shorten
yes
that
answers.
Q&A.
I know, but it's like, it's 25 questions. Just count your yes answers and email me. So we have treatment. There's information on our website. You can email me, Tami, Tami, at Seeking Integrity, and I'll give you more information. And this is another resource for you. Dr. Rob does a one-time 2-hour expert consultation with couples. He does this with couples all over the world, and it's really helpful. It identifies the issues, and it can be very validating, and hopeful. Like, look, yes, this is real, and these are some issues, but there are resources and help, that can help you move forward. And for the couples that choose to do that and follow the guidelines that are given, they can be in a different place. It's also validating for partners. If there's a hard no from an addict, like, then it's data for a partner. Like, look at all of this as data. You have data that he's not willing, and you're trying. There, somebody used, and I wish I knew who, but I love this. It's like, if you're in a rowboat, you're both in a rowboat, and you're paddling like crazy, and he's not rowing at all. Guess what? You're going to go in a circle, and it's maddening, and you're not going to get anywhere. The other analogy I use a lot is, doing a negative 2-step. You're doing all of these things, and he's like, you guys can do that and wear out the floor, and nothing will change. So nothing changes if nothing changes. That said, the one thing that does change is, addiction accelerates. It gets worse. There's more consequences. I suspect when he was motivated for recovery, there had been a recent crisis or discovery. And so then, but then guess what? Things kind of settle down, and yes, you're talking at him, but he's used to that, and he can still keep doing all the things he wants to do. Like Scott said, my best friends or my acting out. So,
Yeah.
but you're not the problem. He's got brokenness. There is healing. There's hope. But right now, I would encourage you to take care of you. One more thing, the healthy boundaries, we talk all the time about, resources for partners. And I refer often to Debbie McCrae's webinars on our website,
Yes.
because I take 4 pages of notes every time we do, one of hers, because she's got so many tools and tips, that, this is like, I don't know what to do. Well, she can give you some helpful, resources to move forward in a different way. So, okay. Where is the line where a boundary is managing the SA? I have a boundary from when we started therapy and group, and a must, or I will ask for a separation. Now it does not feel like enough. He also has ADHD, and homework is such a foreign concept. He's not doing the steps, not reading the books, basically not doing the work. He's had 2 slips, so I feel so dysregulated and unsafe. If I adjust my boundary to include he needs to do the homework, am I managing his recovery, or is this a healthy boundary?
Okay. There is no boundary that will manage a sex addict. Okay. Boundaries are not about controlling the behavior of other people. Boundaries are about how I will respond if you behave in a certain way. So I want to be super clear. Your boundary is not about him, it's about you. So your boundary here is, when you don't do your homework, when you don't go to groups, when you slip and relapse, I feel incredibly dysregulated. I feel unsafe. I'm scared. I wonder about the future. And I wonder even if there's a chance for us to stay together and heal as a couple. So if and when you don't do the homework, don't do this, I will respond by saying, we're going to have a therapeutic separation, or you have to go to inpatient. And if you don't agree to a therapeutic separation or inpatient or whatever it is, then I will do this. I will simply take the kids and leave. Something like, and those are extreme consequences, but also given the situation you're in, it sounds like you're kind of at your wit's end here. You know, just make sure when you set a boundary, when you do this, I will respond this way. You need to respond that way. If you don't, you lose all credibility and your boundaries mean nothing. I was with our alumni on one of our alumni groups the other day, and one of the guys, he was like, "Oh, my wife broke 2 of my boundaries yesterday. She's not supposed to call me between 5 and 6 because that's when I'm driving home from work in rush hour, and she's not supposed to, you know, be on the phone with angry conversations for more than 15 minutes." And yesterday she called me at 5:05 and I answered. We were on the phone for 2 hours and fresh, blah, blah, blah. And I laughed at him and he said, "What?" And I said, "She didn't break your boundaries. You did." You didn't uphold your boundaries. You broke the boundary. If you don't want to take calls from your wife when you're in rush hour, don't take the call. If you don't want to be in a loaded conversation for more than 15 minutes, say our 15 minutes are up. We'll finish this some other time. His boundaries meant nothing to her because he never kept them. So this is, addicts are as bad at boundaries as betrayed partners can be.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead, Tam.
No, I was like, oh yeah, like addiction is boundaryless.
Yeah.
That's one of the problems. We do compulsive behaviors. We don't have boundaries. So I love that example though. And yes, he
Yeah.
broke the boundary. She called, but he didn't have to pick up the phone. And
Right.
the 15 minutes of it, anything that goes on 2 hours, like no good is going to come.
Yeah.
Like
No, nothing good
when we
happens.
when we talk about having like the meetings, I say 20 minutes and set the timer, because like nothing good happens if everybody just gets dysregulated and nothing improves, and you guys can continue those patterns. The Empowered Women's Retreat for You, betrayed partner, on the question we're answering, we talk about internal boundaries and external boundaries and talking boundaries. Like we talk a lot about those things because they are really important. Boundaries are not about control, and there has to be a consequence, and it can be like, yeah, I'm going to, you are not, when you do or don't do these things, I don't feel safe. So therefore I'm going to sleep in another room or whatever. I will be less engaged with you. The ADHD, I do want to comment real quick on that. Lots of addicts have ADHD. It is not a pass. It is not oh, you can't do the homework. No, guess what? We all have, I mean, I don't even know. It's ridiculous how many Post-it notes I have. I'm the queen of Post-it notes because I have ADHD and I need notes to remind myself to do things. And it works for me. I created a system. I have things in my phone that give me reminders. I have calendars. I have all of the tools I need so that I remember to do the things that I need to do. I don't get a pass. Oh, I have ADHD. I can't remember to do my homework. I can set a calendar reminder to go to a 12-step meeting. I can do all of those things that will help me, have the support. And guess what? I don't need somebody else to do that for me. I created my own system that works for me. Addicts, I've heard this excuse, and that's what it is. I've heard this excuse from others. Oh, I have ADHD. You can have an extreme case of ADHD, and you can still be a successful person in recovery. So they are not mutually exclusive. Okay, last question, Scott. I'm the betrayed partner and my husband is seeing a CSAT. He scored a 7 on the long form sex addiction questionnaire and has all the earmarks of addiction, but his CSAT thinks it's a result of religious beliefs rather than addiction. Have you ever heard of this before? He says he isn't watching porn and we haven't done a disclosure. He'll go for weeks, months denying my experience, which is slightly improved from not speaking to me for weeks, but it's not enough to help me feel safe. So so he's slightly improved from not speaking to me for weeks. Oh my gosh. Like, I'm sorry. That is, wow. I'm sorry. I'm having a massive reaction.
Yeah. As for the link between sex addiction and religion, there is none. Sex addiction is not about who or what it turns you on. It's not a moral thing. It's not a religious thing. We diagnose sex addiction based on preoccupation, often to the point of obsession, loss of control, which is generally evidenced by multiple failed attempts to quit or cut back, or an inability to stop once you start, and then negative consequences, which can be relational, work, whatever. If he qualifies on those three, then he's a sex addict. I don't know where or why religion came into this. And he's got a CSAT, which is a certified sex addiction therapist. So, there are moralistic therapists out there who will diagnose something as sex addiction that isn't, because they're implying their moral values onto somebody. But it sounds like that's not what happened here. He's got a properly trained CSAT. I don't really want to give any kind of an opinion on that, other than to say sometimes addicts come home from seeing their CSAT and tell you lies.
That's what I was going to. I was like, that's where I was going. Did you hear that from the CSAT directly? Because if you didn't, right. I would want to hear that from the CSAT directly. But to me, that's less relevant than he just ghosts you for weeks. Like what kind of a relationship is that? How are you supposed to move forward? And I'm going to go right to what are your healthy boundaries? If he's right. not talking to you, what are you doing to take care of yourself? And when he's ready to talk to you, like I might not be available. Like, and it's not about playing games. It's just like, why does he get to control that, oh, now I'm going to talk to you. Now that is, we talk about the avoidant attachment. I don't know what he's doing, but like that to me is so not okay. Like that's a massive issue.
Yeah. Agreed.
Okay. Thanks, everybody. We so appreciate you being here. Again, I'm going to throw it one more time. I put it in the chat. Neglect the Silent Abuser by Dr. Enid Gray, and it's posted on our website under the book resources. And again, she did a podcast with Dr. Rob on sex, love, and addiction, so you can check that out too. But really helpful book, I think. Scott, thanks. So check it out. It's not a hard read, other than you go, oh my gosh, there I am in the pages. From that standpoint. So. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you on other
next
on
month.
others. Yeah, right. Bye.
Bye.